Let's hear it. Yay! Ah, the crowd's going wild. Ah. Okay, hold your excitement, guys. All right, here we go to industrialization. Okay, so this will be Industrial Revolution Part 2 notes. All right, so use your note packet to record the notes from these video lectures. Like the Part 1, there will be several videos, and all of these videos will be for Part 2. Okay, so make sure you read the instructions so that you know exactly what to do with these guys. As with all the video lectures, I will pause briefly after each slide so that you have time to pause the video as needed so that you can get down all of your information for your notes. All right. There are also videos within this video lecture. I will provide some additional information and questions at the end of the video clips, and then you'll have to go back through, watch the little video clips, and get the information that I ask you to look for. And then lastly, I will also emphasize certain points of information throughout the lecture that will tell you which particular items are guaranteed to show up on the test. However, also keep in mind that all information in the video lectures is fair game for the test. All right, guys, let's get down to it. So, industrialization. In Part 1, we talked about the agricultural revolution and how the industrial revolution got started. Now we're going to talk about how industrialization really started to kick in and start to change the landscapes of towns, cities, and particularly people's lives. Let's start off with urbanization. Okay, urbanization is the idea of just having lots of buildings, lots of movement of people to the cities. Just an example, the city of Manchester in England, in the year 1760, it only had 45,000 people. Now, even for that time period, that's a fairly large city. Less than 100 years later, it balloons to 300,000 people. That, for that time period, that is insanely massive. Lots and lots of people, lots of movement of people into cities. That is urbanization. Now let's talk a little bit how these cities started to develop. We'll start talking with living conditions. All right, with these cities, there were no city plans. Okay, it's not like they when they came up with these cities for people to move into from the countryside to look for jobs. It's not like they carefully laid out these cities. Sometimes a town would just start with a few factories and a couple of coal mines. And then more jobs would start to surface and more people would start to show up. And then all of a sudden a city started to grow up around these factories and these mines. And it was just factories and buildings and homes. And they just started going up wherever people could build them. All right, there were no sanitation codes. Laws were very lax sometimes. No building codes. So a lot of buildings could be built unsafe and there was nobody around to force them to be safe. There were no laws making sure that human waste was properly taken care of. That industrial waste, pollution was properly taken care of. It was just dumped in the rivers. They're the same rivers that people wash their clothes in, the same rivers that people drink water from, and the same rivers that sometimes people bathed in. A lot of unpaved streets, very little drainage. So water would just collect and start to seep, and during the warmer months, you guessed it, lots of bugs and mosquitoes, which also bring disease. Okay, there was no trash service. All right, so the conditions within these cities as they started to spring up were just overall dirty and unhealthy. Diseases like cholera and dysentery thrived. They absolutely thrived. All right, this will start the one of the first videos. There we go.
Factory work was much different from the system of cottage industry. Under the old system, cloth merchants had a fairly close relationship with their workers and generally took an interest in their well-being. But large factories and rigid production schedules did not allow for much familiarity between owners and workers. And factory work was more tiring than home manufacturing, even though the factories kept the same 12 to 14-hour work schedule, 6 days a week, that the cottage workers had followed. Factory work had greater production demands, was very monotonous, and few breaks were allowed. Plus, working conditions in factories were much worse than in cottage settings. Many of the earliest factories, referred to by labor reformers as the dark, satanic mills, were noisy and dangerous places in which to work, full of dust and fumes that often resulted in permanent physical damage to workers. Children, robbed of their childhoods, worked long hours in the mills, and women and children were paid only a fraction of what the men earned. Many mill owners believed that the lower classes had to be kept poor in order to make them industrious. But even though wages were low, at least workers could rely on them, so that they rarely faced the extreme poverty they had known in the past. Although the working classes did not at first share in the wealth created by the Industrial Revolution, the middle and upper classes prospered, and great fortunes were made as wealth shifted from the hands of land-owning aristocrats to factory-owning capitalists. One famous social critic of the time, who worked to bring about changes in the law to benefit the poor working classes, was Charles Dickens. His books offer vivid portrayals of life during the first Industrial Revolution. And Karl Marx, a Dickens contemporary, who lived in England for much of his life, wrote his two famous books, Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto, in response to the social injustices he witnessed as a result of industrialization. During the time of Marx and Dickens, many factories had switched to coal instead of water as a source of power. The problem with using water or wind to run machines was that they could be unreliable sources of energy. A windmill couldn't operate on windless days, and a water-powered factory came to a complete halt during dry spells.
All right. So I want you to go back through the video and listen for, look and listen for these items. So first, I want you to provide 4 adjectives for factory life that they talked about in the video. Now these next items, these are questions that you can use in your left-hand column for your notes. Okay, so questions that you can use in the left-hand column for your question section to help you study these notes. So first one, what were children's work days and wages like, according to information from the video? What were children's work days and wages like? Next, though working conditions were harsh, what did steady wages allow factory workers to avoid? Though working conditions were harsh, what did steady wages allow factory workers to avoid? And then lastly, why did many factories switch to coal burning for power? Why did many factories switch to coal burning for power? Okay, so you can go back and replay not only the video here, but also the questions that I just gave you. You can replay that so that you can get it all down. Okay, we're going to move on with the next part of the lecture. All right, tenement housing. Tenement housing means housing for the poor. They are large buildings with lots of rooms in there. Multiple people, sometimes even or often, multiple families are sharing one-room apartments. They are cramped, they are dirty, they are unsafe, they are fire traps. They stink, both literally and figuratively. Not fun places to live, but this is all that there was for the working people of the factories and the mines. Mostly low-income people lived there. Very little airflow, which meant everyone was breathing each other's diseased air. Very little, if any, privacy. They were always close to factories or mines so that people could get up early, get to their workplace, get home to catch a few hours of sleep, and then get up and go again. And there was one bathroom on each floor, folks, and that's if they were lucky. Everyone on the floor, multiple families, multiple individuals, all shared the same bathroom. An even better plus, if it was around, they actually had running water. That was, again, if they were lucky. If not, they'd have to go downstairs, all the way downstairs, to go get pails of water, bring them up so that they could bathe. Pretty rough going, folks. Pretty rough going. Now, what I love about this image here, take a look at those dudes. Okay? They all look fairly dark-skinned. Okay? Those are all Caucasian, light-skinned Englishmen. The reason they are so dark is because they work and more or less live, but work in the mines, specifically coal mines. Okay, so sometimes they never got clean. Okay, which over time is really bad for their skin. So all these chemicals and all the coal dust and everything, just horrible, absolutely horrible. Okay, you can tell multiple families share this quarters because you have multiple clotheslines with everyone's laundry hanging. This is just one family sharing this one upstairs apartment, if you will. All right, so the average worker had about a 14-hour long day, and they worked 6 days a week. Usually they had Sundays off. Sometimes they didn't. So long work days. There were a lot of women and children workers, and the children were both very young kids and teens. Factories were pretty poorly lit, very dirty. Time was money. People were replaceable. Hours in the day were not. That's how factory owners looked at it. If someone got hurt, lost a hand, lost a limb, they were injured and couldn't work, simply cast out and fired. There's no workman's compensation. There is no medical insurance to help them out. They're just simply cast away, thrown out, fired, no more income, because there were always people waiting around to take the place of that worker. It was pretty rough. As bad as that was, the coal miners got the worst of the deals. Even longer work days, very little light, lots of heavy lifting, lots of shovel work, plus all the dangerous gases of working in the mines, the risks of cave-ins and flooding, which was very frequent, and usually very little ways out. The life of a coal miner was short, harsh, and not worth it. It was a pretty bad way to work and live. Okay, another video.
Before improvements in transportation, factories were built in areas where iron and coal mines were close at hand. These areas where mines, factories, and workers crowded together, developed into industrial cities, and they almost immediately became difficult places in which to live. Here, the water and air became terribly polluted, as dark clouds of smoke poured from factory chimneys, from ovens where coal was converted into coke, and from the fireplaces in the simple homes of thousands of miners and factory workers. Everything was covered with a dark layer of soot. Industrial waste and sewage fouled the rivers and streams. And the land that only recently had been green and fertile was torn up as more and more mines and factories appeared, and new rows of workers' houses sprouted up in the nearby fields. These industrial towns were dreary, overcrowded, and unhealthy places to raise a family. But eventually changes started to be made to benefit the workers. A handful of enlightened industrialists created a few model villages for workers, and these were a great improvement over how they had lived before. Later in the 19th century, Many other social improvements followed. Laws banning labor unions were repealed, and child labor was outlawed. Although there were plenty of economic bad times, the working classes had reached a point where they sometimes had extra money to spend. In fact, they now made up a vast new market for the manufactured goods they helped produce. Wealth, it seemed, created more wealth. Free public schools were instituted all across England for the very first time, resulting in the first working-class generation that was able to read and write. These new educational skills provided some young people with a ticket away from a dreary future in the mines and factories to better paying, less monotonous jobs.
All right, so just some quick ideas on the video we just watched. So I want you to describe in 2 to 3 sentences within your notes here, within the body of the notes, describe in 2 to 3 sentences what life was like in the factory and mining towns. Describe in 2 to 3 sentences what life was like in the factory and mining towns. Now these next 2 items, you can use them as questions along your left-hand side. First one, which big opportunity or ticket popped up for young people to help them out of a dreary factory life? Which big opportunity or ticket popped up for young people to help them out of a dreary factory life? Next, which horrors did Sinclair's... Oh, never mind. Skip that one. Okay, so this will conclude this first section of part 1, or excuse me, this first section of part 2 for Industrial Revolution.